chosen to test this station's destructive power on your home planet of Alderaan, named the Sith Order.
Bulky religions and ancient weapons are no match for a good blast. Like I'm coming up on Alderaan.
You may fire when ready.
One Alderaan Explosion Eric's official countdown to Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. It's 77 days until release. My name's John Blight, your Jedi Master, and joining me, my Padawans who don't get sick of being called my Padawans, Ashley Hobley.
Hey Dylan, excited to be here to hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis.
Aren't we all? And Ciaran Marchant.
Happy to be here, we are.
Oh, good. Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
It's
No,
taking
we
you
got
this
Yoda on this episode.
Yeah.
What an
four
upgrade!
episode.
An upgrade, I am not. Ciaran be the bestest.
Is he though?
Ciaran and Yoda have something very similar in common. They walk slow, and you may think they can't get around pretty fast, but when it comes to action, flippity bow. Thank you all for joining us this week on this week's episode of Alderaan Explosion. You can follow me on Twitter.
Just in case anybody's confused, it's not Yoda, it's Ciaran. Hey, it was a
What?
spot-on impression.
Oh,
It's Ciaran here.
unbelievable!
Sorry. See you, Yoda.
Shock.
Thanks for stopping in. He's gone now.
See you in 8 weeks.
We'll be back to talk about your death. Yeah, so we're talking about episode 3 this week, of course, Revenge of the Sithis. And as always, kind of just going to open up with the check-in. Ash, when was the last time you watched this movie, and do you reckon you have any different thoughts between that time and this time?
I'm pretty sure it was 2 years ago when we did it for this podcast.
I think I've heard this before.
Yeah, we might just have to. We could just save time and use the same clip every week.
Just re-record the same segment.
I keep checking in because I'm like, maybe one time you'll be like, oh no, I randomly watched this one. Like,
No, yeah, no, it was better than the other two, but there's still, there's some not so great things in it still. Just anything with Anakin, really. It's not great. And yeah, I feel like some stuff has been sort of filled in, and then there's some stuff like at the start I completely forgot the Doku cut off Anakin's arm.
Dooku?
Yeah,
Doku?
even though I saw
Doku?
it. Doku? Sudoku? Yeah. Even though we watched that movie last week.
Even though we talked about it last week.
Yeah.
Count
completely forgot.
Doku.
I'm like, I had to quickly search on my phone. Is this the thing that happened in the movie, or is it like a Clone Wars thing? No, it happened in the movie.
Yeah, it happened in the movie. Shocking. Ciaran, when was the last time you watched this movie, and how do you feel about it?
I don't think I've watched it since... I think it's been 2 years for me as well, because I wasn't going to watch this until I'd watched all of Clone Wars initially, until we started doing the show. I think I didn't mind it as much this time as I think I hated on it a lot last time. I think I even said this was the worst one out of the prequels for me.
Really? I don't...
Yeah, I think I said... I really like... Because I used to think that, and I always
Cut to a
remember
clip.
thinking that. But I think Anakin is... I prefer this Anakin over Clone Wars, like Attack of the Clones Anakin. Because it's more like Clone Wars Anakin, even though it's a bit shitter. He's not... I don't know. I kind of don't mind him as much. If that makes sense.
Well, a lot of the movie is like you get a lot less whining, and then by the time you get down to more whining, it's like enraged turning to dark side whining, which kind of makes more sense.
Yeah, like there's still more. I don't know. It's still a shit rendition of the character, but
You turned her against me.
yeah.
So I watched it, I think, like a year ago. It was on TV, and I watched it. I think, because I'm going to be honest, like as we're ending every episode, and we're placing them in our rankings. I don't actually know what my Star Wars ranking is. I've never done it. I've never put much thought into it. It always scares me. And the fun thing about doing this podcast for its final season is I'm going to discover my Star Wars ranking as everyone else does. But having said that, I think I may surprise some people with how high I probably end up ranking this movie. I actually really, really like this movie. This is the one that's kind of grown on me the most over the years. The one I'm quite happy to watch. The one that I actually think is a good movie. I very much enjoy this movie of the prequels. I think it sits shoulders lengths above the previous two, and I love the final act so much. And there's just lots of things I really enjoy. It has some of the best music. Even though some of it's already been used before in previous prequel movies, but they bring it back, and then there's some new stuff, and like the culmination, this probably has, I don't know, the best Star Wars soundtrack, maybe. I don't know. It's like just lots of things I really, really love about this. So I think when push comes to shove, I might have to make some decisions in my Star Wars ranking list that actually ends up igniting internet fanboy wars.
Part of me is scared by where this is going to end, because I'm thinking about it compared to like
The original
it worries
trilogy.
me that part of me thinks this is going to end up above one of the original trilogy, and I have a feeling I know which of the original trilogy it's going to be above, and I think it'll trigger me because I. So, yeah, not looking forward to that.
No spoilers, but, never say never. Nobody's ever really gone. So, yeah, I of course, I took my notes here, and we're kind of going to go across the notes I wrote down while watching a movie and use those as some jumping off points for stuff. But jumping into it, shall we?
The dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural.
Is it possible to learn this power?
Not from a Jedi.
The Council wants you to report on all the Chancellor's dealings.
That's treason.
We are at war, Anakin.
The Crawl is what the final act of the final arc of Clone Wars Season 7 is basically going to be about. Hey, let's talk about how awesome the Clone Wars Season 7 trailer is. And see, I honestly feel like, because I'm starting the movie and I'm reading the Crawl, and it's like, Dooku has kidnapped Palpatine from blah, 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 like Obi-Wan and all this sort of thing have rushed into office. When the Clone Wars originally was cancelled, before they announced that Season 7 was coming to Disney Plus, of course, next year, February or whenever it is, they did at one Star Wars celebration 2 years ago, they showed like rough sketches and like a rough mock-up of like what the final episodes of the series would have been about. So I kind of know the way it's going to go. And basically it would have tied the Clone Wars series pretty much up to the second before Revenge of the Sith starts. So the last episode would have basically ended with like Anakin, or even the last episode could potentially go in past the point of like where this movie starts and Obi-Wan and Anakin are in their ships flying around, of course, where this movie kicks off. The last episode of the Clone Wars could still go past that moment with stuff happening with Ahsoka down here, because unless they change things, you have Anakin and Ahsoka and Obi-Wan all together, and then they get the call that Palpatine has been kidnapped, so then they rush off to go help him, obviously. So that's how it's all going to tie in. But the other thing is, and the reason I think that this movie's, of course, grown on me, and I brought up the Clone Wars series so much last episode, and I'm going to continue for this, because the prequels is, to me, heavily Clone Wars. Like, the Clone Wars is the prequels to me. The reason I enjoy watching these movies now is because of the Clone Wars. The Clone Wars animated series is what reignited my love for Star Wars. The Clone Wars TV series is, as far as I'm concerned, the one thing that kept Star Wars alive. It isn't Disney buying it and making more movies. It was that TV series that kept it alive, and was possibly the best thing that's happened to Star Wars, bar to the franchise being invented itself. Like, most of the best characters and stories have come from that. So I can't help but bring it up every single time I talk about the prequels.
I feel like now watching it and having a better appreciation for the Clone Wars, I find it really weird that there is a large audience base for this movie, for like these movies that have just never seen Clone Wars in the whole. Like, for me, I can't believe that I did that. Yeah, Ashley. until he's gonna binge it in like 2 days, and then he'll come back in and be like, "Hey, what up, nerds?"
2. I'm not that.
He's like, try 4.
Yeah, I have things to do.
But I think even like for me, I don't understand how like it just gives so much more of an appreciation to the prequels and gives so much more. And I think it fleshes this movie out so much. I think this movie is the biggest beneficiary of that information.
Yes.
Because this movie, I feel like the original, like, I don't know, like the way the 3 movies are cut up for story beats feels, when you watch Clone Wars, feels really weird. Like, just the fact that it's like almost as if the Clone Wars should have started in episode 1, and then episode 2 should have been a large majority of in the Clone Wars, and then episode 3 should be the end of the Clone Wars and what we have. Like,
well, I honestly
But then we
think-
wouldn't have got pod racing, and I mean, what's the point?
Yeah, that's true. What's the point of life without that? I in my mind, I think the reason I like this movie so much at the moment, or these days, the last couple of years, ever since, Clone Wars existed and whatever, the reason I like it so much is because I kind of watch it as the last episode or the movie length feature.
yes, yeah.
That is the live action finisher of the Clone Wars TV series. I don't really view it in a weird way. I don't view it as episode 3. It is like the final live action episode of the Clone Wars animated TV series. Because all of the history that comes prior to watching this movie, what's been going on, who are a bunch of these characters, who are all the big players, the slow build up of Anakin turning to the dark side, Ahsoka, that's all these things, like, it's all that. And I watched this movie, I'm like, oh, this is the grand finale of that TV series, where everyone else watches it as the finale of the prequels, where I'm like, yeah, sure, it's that. But to me, that's like below it being the cap off of an animated TV series.
Well, it just, like, as a whole for storytelling, they bring in elements that, like, they bring in characters that aren't featured in the rest of the series. Like, they bring in General Grievous, and it's just kind of like, except that he's there, he's had no build-up in the movies. If you just look at the 3 movies in isolation, he's had no build-up, he's got nothing, he's just kind of there to be cool robot person. That
He was there to sell toys.
Does he have... Yeah, he's there to sell toys. And then you've got this other weird bookend to Count Dooku that, like, it's like somebody chopped the middle of a book out for a character and just kind of stuck the last page and the first page together, and we're like, yeah, there you go. There's your story for him.
That's
and
what I'm
you're
saying. When you watch these movies so close, even like just a week apart, it is so weird watching the end of episode 2 where they battle him, and then you start this one, they're like, oh, kill him. It's really weird. Whereas if you watch the animated series, they have, that couple of years worth of history between them and running around from one another and political intrigue happening and whatever else that's been going on. And then you watch this, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I watch the start of this movie, I see Cuckoo get Cuckoo. Jesus, Ash is fucking
Cuckoo?
Oh, Cuckoo the Dooku. You see Dooku get killed at the start of this, and that's what I'm saying. Subconsciously, even if I'm not really thinking about it, I do have so much more history if you've watched the Clone Wars. Yeah, and that show does such a good job at writing within the boundaries that these movies set up, and that's because they weren't created by, some random other person off the side here. George Lucas created the Clone Wars. George Lucas was heavily involved in the Clone Wars as much as he was these movies. He didn't pilot the first episode and just hand it off to people. George Lucas was there in the trenches, if you want to put it that way, and that's why you end up with things like Jar Jar still being used a lot and whatever. But George Lucas, in some ways, I feel like he really did the prequel trilogy so he could start doing spin-off things like the Clone Wars, because I feel like he put way more effort and passion and whatever else into the characters that were created. That, like Ahsoka Tano, it's like, here's a character that it's like, let's give Anakin a Padawan. He never thought to do that in the movies, but he kept it in this spin-off series thing. I'm like, okay, I think George has had more of a passion for long-form storytelling than he did at movies, weirdly.
Which is really strange, and like when you say boundaries, it's like the boundaries are like some of the most far apart boundaries in the book. It's like, well, you've got this bit here where it starts, the Clone Wars, and you've got this bit a couple years later when the Clone Wars finishes, or even after the Clone Wars, go ahead and fill that in. And you're like...
Basically.
Yeah, which is really weird for a movie series to go fill in this section. It's almost as if you watch Lord of the Rings and you didn't get Helm's Deep. They just kind of were like... Characters will just turn up at the end after Helm's Deep and be like talking about it, and you're like...
In my mind, it really just it to me, it's always been that George designed, like in his mind, as weird as it is, wasn't bothered about there being this big gap of missing information, because in his mind it was like, well, I'm doing the Clone Wars anyway, like well, just people watch that, it'll be fine, like, and it doesn't work as a 3-movie thing to have that much information skip, but it does work if you are partaking and watching everything, I guess, but
poor Ashley poor Ashley's like, what the hell?
No, don't know what happened.
Why is
Dooku cut his arm
dying?
off in one movie and then he got his head chopped off in the other.
Oh, spoilers already, fuck. But, here's the, I was just, Ashley came into this movie thinking, can't wait to learn a bit more about Doki. Gonna see him really ramp it up, this Doki guy.
Dooku, yeah.
He's gonna get really big and powerful and scary, and he's dead. Oh.
Before we continue too much longer on a fucking Clone Wars tirade, which was kind of been the last 2 episodes of this podcast at this stage, but so I rewatched the Clone Wars season 7 trailer because after I finished watching the movie, because of course, and I just want to say that I'm gonna chuck it out there. I honestly would nearly take season 7 of the Clone Wars over another live action Star Wars movie. I feel so much more attachment, and I get so much, like, I can nearly feel tears welling up watching that trailer. I'm like, I have so much investment in these fucking characters. It is unbelievable.
Well, I mean, those characters have been on screen more than any other characters, other iterations of
way
Star
more
Wars
time
characters.
with them. Yeah, I'm like, oh man, there's a one shot. So not to spend too much time in the trailer, because as I said,
we're going to
fucking
spend
Clone
a fair
Wars
bit of time
podcast
on
at this
this
stage. No, I'll get past it fast. I just want to say that, like, they set up. There's a part because Ahsoka leaves the Jedi Order in like season end of 5 or 6. I can't even remember. End of 5. But in this, they have her like coming back, and there's a part where the clone troopers are like they've painted on like her symbol onto their helmets as like a show of like being her troops and like welcoming her back. I'm like, my precious heart, like, just weep for me. Oh God, Ahsoka, like, help me. And then there's part at the end where Maul turns up too, so that's really cool. Can't wait for old mate Maul to be back. But yeah,
I noticed that he had 2 legs.
Yeah,
he does spider leg thing.
No, spoilers. Ash, he gets rid of the spider things within a few episodes of the.
Doesn't he have spider legs in Solo?
No. He has
you only see his head in Solo.
Okay.
And Ash, you've watched the Rebels episode where he dies. Well,
yeah,
you've watched the scene.
I've seen the scene. It was a while ago.
Yeah, but as we've learnt, Ash can watch a movie one week ago and then forget what happened the week after. So.
Yeah. Whatever Mondu did, I don't know.
Mondu. All right, let's move on. The rest of my notes continued. Look at this battle. I want this battle in episode 9. And by that, I mean the part where Obi-Wan and Anakin are flying the ships over, the huge battle that's happening. And there's so many ships in this scene. It's probably the most ships, I guess, you see in any of the Star Wars movies in a very like close combat sequence like this. Of course, you kind of get the X-Wings versus TIE Fighters and these sorts of things in the original movies. But it really doesn't show... I would say what they show here, because there's one shot from above, like a bird's eye kind of view, where they show there's heaps of ships happening down here, and it just seems like there is a fuck ton of ships. Like, even like they never zoom out to show the full scope, but it's like I kind of want this, but more combined with how much that's going on here, and then combine that with kind of what they do in Rogue One, where there wasn't quite as much happening here. I kind of really hope that episode 9 has an epic space battle, is what I want.
I think this is... The start of this episode is as close to the Obi-Wan Anakin banter that I love that you don't really get in Clone Wars as much, because in Clone Wars it's more of a Master and Padawan kind of banter of back and forth. But I think this one they're a lot closer almost with the banter, and there's a lot more almost not quite equals, but Anakin is of such a more higher standing now.
Well, yeah, it's like in Attack of the Clones, the last movie, you're watching that and it's like he's a Padawan. Now, between the two movies, he becomes a general, and he's his own person now. He's not Padawan Anakin Skywalker now. He's a general leading in the army and all these sorts of things. So they're kind of more at equal grounds here. Of course, Obi-Wan's on the Jedi Council, which puts him somewhat above and whatever else. But yeah, you can tell they're more like just equals going into battle together as friends, more than just like Jedi Master and Padawan kind of leading one another. And then the next thing I note kind of ties into that as well. I wrote down, they do show Anakin's passion. He wants to go help the clones. So, and this is like a subtle little detail that I guess it would fly over most people, but as much as you could be like, how does he go from being such a, to an evil person straight away? Or like, I hear a lot of people say there was never any good in him in the first place and all these sorts of things. They always kind of like show that there is definitely good in him. And he has a, whereas Obi-Wan gives two shits and he's like happy to stick to the mission. He's like, the clones are doing what they got to do. They got to, if they got to die for the mission, that's what they're for. But Anakin actually has enough passion within him to actually like say, I want to go help the clones, and Obi-Wan has to tell him, no, we can't do that. And not to tie it back to the Clone Wars again, but there are a lot of episodes of the Clone Wars where Anakin will kind of do really kind of outlandish things to try and save people, where other Jedi would have just gone, nah, fuck it, like,
man,
we can't. They're dead. It's fine. We'll leave them.
Crazy what a 180 Tony does.
Yeah.
Or even just like this movie establishes Anakin as a good starfighter pilot, because I don't think that is established in Clone Wars, and there's like inklings in Phantom Menace of him being inklings of him in Phantom Menace being good, but a lot of the times the part where he's in a fighter, it's like a lot of luck in many ways, where he's doing just random shit and being like, oh boy, I can now shoot this thing, and just the kid pisses me off. So there's no, but you get a sense of, oh, he's a really good starfighter pilot. He is confident in himself. I now see how this links to the future, where we get Darth Vader.
It's an episode.
That's my name. Fuck up for the episode. There we go. Then we get, in Darth Vader, we get this legendary starfighter pilot who everybody's scared of, and this shows that connection.
Yeah, for sure. Next thing I wrote down was, much like his visions as a kid, what he sees is nothing but a possible future, as Yoda would tell him. But he believes in them too hard, believes them to be truth at all times. So I wrote this into response where we skipped ahead a bit after the battle at this point, and he's laying in bed and he's having they have that first nightmare scene where he sees Padme dying, and he wakes up in the middle of the night and walks out to the night sky and looks out, and this is where he starts having all these dark thoughts about Padme dying and these sorts of things, which that's the thing, like, he is always from day dot in all of these prequel movies, whenever they show anything to do with Anakin's like precognition or whatever you want to call it, he always takes it all to be true. Not like a figment of the future, not like a possible future. It is, whatever he's saying is set in stone. And that's actually a theme they carry into other Star Wars things, including the one of the comics I'm talking about in a moment as well. But it's like, if he'd believed, and I find it really weird because, like, Qui-Gon Jinn, they've set up in the canon as like, so Qui-Gon Jinn was introduced to the prophecies by Count Dooku. Dooku was Qui-Gon's master. Dooku was into the prophecies. Lots of Jedi don't give any shits about the prophecies because everyone, including Yoda's like, don't dabble in that shit. That's like a path to the dark side. Like how Yoda even tells Anakin later in the movie, of course, like, don't look into that sort of stuff. That's like,
Yoda's like, everything's a path to the dark side.
Yeah, well, pretty much, yeah. So then Qui-Gon
to the dark side. It is.
Yeah, probably is.
It is.
Dooku then introduces Qui-Gon to the prophecies. Qui-Gon then, of course, gets obsessed with the prophecies to the point where Phantom Menace, he thinks he's discovered the prophesized child. And then although they show in that movie that Obi-Wan's like a bit, you know, he doesn't really, he's not full into the prophecies, but he's well aware that Qui-Gon's, you gather that even in that movie that Qui-Gon's of course taught him about them, but Obi-Wan's more like, don't really fully believe them. But then you kind of gather after Qui-Gon dies that Obi-Wan becomes a little bit more of a believer, I guess, because of the fact that his master basically died and his last wish was to see what he believed as the prophesized child come through and all these sorts of things. But even Qui-Gon and Count Dooku and all these other people who within other material they've showed believe in the prophecies and these sorts of things, they always never like take them for 100%. Like for what's written, that's what's going to come true. And basically anytime Anakin has a vision of anything, including like his mother's death and then Padme's death and all these sorts of things, he never believes like there's a possibility to change any of these things. And Yoda is somewhat right, because then he is like the fact he gets so obsessed with believing that's exactly what's going to happen and that's the future and that's what it holds, that is what leads him down to the dark side, obsessing over these futures that he thinks he can see without the ability to change anything about them.
Is there a possibility that these visions are provided by Darth Sidious? Because in the future, I mean, what's his name? Snoke makes the connection between Rey and Ben in the Last Jedi. Is there some
I don't think so. I think it's just some Jedi just have extra sort of powers that others don't, and they've kind of covered this and other stuff as well. Like some Jedi, including Sifo Dyas, had like similar sorts of. He also had the ability to have like precognition, like sees futures, these sorts of things. So it's not like a super uncommon thing. And that's what I was saying when I was talking about the Phantom Menace. Whenever I see that scene about Anakin talking about, you know, he's seen this, which when you watch it and you're not paying too much attention, it just comes off as like some child just thinking all this sort of stuff or whatever. But to me, it's Anakin, even at a young age, showing that he has always had dreams like this. Like he's always had dreams that are his precognitive abilities. That was a fucking mouthful. He's always kind of shown them, but
also precognitive.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, that's the
precognitive.
one.
Thank you.
As we discussed in the first season of Alderaan Explosion, words don't mean anything. It doesn't matter how they're pronounced. No. And I think what as he gets older and he starts like having all the visions about stuff, he just becomes more obsessed with them because they're showing things, and he starts to believe that they're going to come true at all points in time. So they actually tie this into something else. So I recently read through Darth Vader, Dark Lords of the Sith, volumes 1-4, which we had previously mentioned, I think in episode 2, the Phantom Menace episode. I think we'd previously mentioned the whole Darth Vader comic book where Palpatine's behind his mother, and like it makes it out like he's putting the Anakin, the baby, inside of it. Like he makes it out how this thing's happening. So in that comic, because I only ever skimmed that section. I never read these volumes through until just recently, start to finish. So what it is that Vader goes to Mustafar, right? This is shortly after episode 3. And he's like, I'm going to build my castle here, which of course we only ever introduced to the concept of Vader's castle in Rogue One. Until that stage, we didn't know this was a thing. Now the idea of Vader's castle has kind of become a fan favorite, like heavily used, like cool thing that Vader builds this castle on Mustafar. Like it's in the fucking VR game that's on Oculus and these sorts of things. Heavy used thing. So as he goes there, and the reason he wants to build his castle there is because he finds like a really strong dark side of the Force, like a fissure point basically, which he manages to open up in the final issue, and he kind of walks through this gateway. And it's a really weird thing because it's kind of like he's entering the dark side of the Force, or like the dark side of the Force is kind of showing him something. And he's walking through it as like a ghostly figure. Like he kind of drops out of his own body. So he's like in this otherworldly place, right? And he's seeing past, present, and future. So they show scenes of
obviously young Anakin walking down. They throw some random like prequel quotes up on the in letterboxes on the comic, like, now this is what I call pod racing, and things like that, like, which is quite funny to read in the comic.
And he just regrets it. He's like, if I could go back and kill myself when I was a kid, I would do it. Like, I'd stop that.
There's literally a scene where they show like young Anakin walking past, and the big looming shadow of Vader like reaches out and like begins choking him. So you can read into that what that's supposed to mean. I guess I don't know if that means he wishes he could actually go back and kill himself. Maybe he does. I don't know. Like, that's the thing about this last sequence, is there's no explanation for it. It's all very much left up for you to decipher what it is. Of course, he walks down further. He sees his mother standing there. Palpatine's behind her. He has hands out. Looks like Palpatine's putting the baby in there. And then he goes up further. He has a vision of him fighting Ahsoka in the Star Wars Rebels episode where Vader comes down and finds her there. Which, by the way, when you read this comic book, which was made after that Rebels episode, and then you go back and you rewatch that Rebels episode, Vader literally comes down on top of the TIE fighter and then says, "It was foretold that you would be here." And then when you rewatch that episode after reading the comic where he has a vision of this fight, it's like, either that's a really fucked up coincidence, or there was literally this much like subtle planning happening around. I don't care. Either way, it really fucking works in a cool way, because obviously once you read the comic, it's like, oh, he had a fucking vision of this fight. Like, then he's like, yeah, it was foretold he would be here, Ahsoka, right? Okay, yeah, this all makes sense. And then they even tie it all the way into the sequel trilogy now, where then the last couple words he hears, and because it's a comic, you kind of have to take it as these are like whispers of voices, like kind of happening around him. Like, think Rey's vision in episode 7 or something like that, with just random voices just all happening around him. And the last couple text box that you see are the words, kill it, fuck the full Kylo Ren thing, you know, like kill it if you have to, the past, like that. That's the last couple words that appear, and it's like, oh fuck, okay, so he's hearing about Kylo Ren now. And then by the very end of it, he kind of goes up, he bumps into a Padme who turns around, and she like turns into a devil face and like falls away and all these weird things. And then this giant blue blast appears at the end of the opposite end of where he's like standing in this castle. And then out from the blue blast kind of appears this figure that looks like Luke Skywalker, of course. And then Vader's kind of knocked out this vision and returns to his own body. The comic then ends with Vader exiting his castle and just simply saying yes. It's kind of like he's accepted his fate at this point, because the entire reason he wanted and entered that place in the first place was because he was it's still at this stage, and this is like a year or so after episode 3 takes place, he's still obsessed with the idea of being able to bring Padme back to life. And the entire reason he enters this dark side of the Force thing, or whatever you want to call it, is because he's trying to find a way to get Padme back. And then the dark side of the Force shows him that it ain't happening. This is the way it is now. And then once he exits, it's Vader like actually fully officially accepting that this is his life now. Like, this is him fully giving into the dark side. But the thing is, like, if this is the dark side of the Force showing him a vision, much like all other visions that they show him getting within episode 3, 2, 1, what have you, he takes everything he sees for granted. And I don't know if that means that us as the readers, watchers, whatever, of any of this stuff have to, you know? Do I take the fact that he sees Padme dying in a vision mean that she has to die? No, I don't, because it's like that was his choice. Was he always destined to go down that path? I don't know. Yeah, but it's just, I don't know. Like, my viewpoint
there's a thing where you are,
and she does,
but part of that is, yes, there is some coincidence that leads him to where, you know, he finds his mother. You know, had he been quicker, he could have saved her. Had he, you know, there's just decisions that the only reason we know that those visions are true is because Anakin accepted those visions as true in the movie. We don't know what would happen if Anakin hadn't accepted those visions as true, which is the whole, like, it's a complex.
Pretty sure she would have died.
Who?
Anakin's mum.
Okay, yeah, but just because one of the things he has a vision actually comes true does not mean that all of them are destined to come true. That's what I'm saying.
But they all
depends, Ash. It depends, Ash. Are you someone who believes that your future is just You know, have you ever seen Donnie Darko? Or we just follow?
I don't know. I've never had visions before, so.
But like, this is where there's conflicted information that the audience is being given, because Yoda's telling people the visions aren't always the truth.
Yes.
And then we are seeing it from Anakin's point of view, who doesn't believe what Yoda says and very much believes that this is the truth.
It's the truth. Yes. And that's why, that's what I'm saying. Like, the movies are quite interesting from that standpoint, because I believe that most people who watch the movies will just take the visions as their truth, and the same can be said for when we come across to the comic thing, which basically everyone takes this whole, you go on the internet, most people think that this Palpatine like thing of like him making Anakin or whatever, like from behind, and all this imagery that we see. You can read the comic and you can see that one picture, and they do nothing to explain it. And once again, like the movies, it's like, okay, I guess that most people read this are just going to take that for granted. But as I'm reading this thing, I'm like, oh, but I shouldn't be. Like, I think the whole point is I shouldn't be just believing that because...
isn't that just the dark side, if that is the dark side, trying to convince Anakin that he was always meant to be bad? Like, that he was always meant for this because he was created by the dark side.
It could be that. It could be just a manifestation of his biggest fear. Like Palpatine was literally the one that kind of created him.
The thing is, I think I've always thought that since you've brought up that theory of Palpatine being involved in his creation, Palpatine strikes me as the type of character that would later down the track rub that in Darth Vader's face almost. Like, at a breaking point, be like, well, I did this, and this is the truth. And you can't
Darth,
deal with that.
I am your father.
As he's flying,
you know it to be true.
That fucking episode 6 when he's flying down that tunnel after Vader chucks him off. You fucking prick! I am your father.
Yeah, like I see him as a character that would use that information to manipulate Darth Vader. Like, that's why I find it hard to believe it's never come up from Sidious himself.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because a lot of the prequel stuff is like visions and weird mystical shit and blah blah blah. The main line, the main set, episode 4 through 6 didn't have any of that. The sequel trilogy has dabbled in that stuff. Rebels and Clone Wars have featured this sort of stuff quite heavily, like some of the more mystical sides of the Force. But it's always quite interesting to be like, well, who do I trust here? From the viewpoint of the character I'm taking it through, from the writer of the episode, should I just trust it myself? I don't know, it's always quite interesting. So next thing I wrote down was music that kicks in as Anakin comes into the opera scene. Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? Ironic. So this scene is absolutely fantastic. I love it. It's heavily memed, of course, but it is still the best, as far as I'm concerned, best Palpatine scene that we get in anything Star Wars. Yeah, it's fun to see him like, full on Emperor, fucked up face, like cackling, of course, and all that sort of stuff. As fun as that is, this is the most like just the sly like face movements he makes, like when he's telling the story and he's like uplifting, and just how menacing I think he comes across, and like how much you can tell he's playing Anakin and all these sorts of things. And of course,
how did you know that Anakin thought Padme was going to die?
But
Anakin, like, this is where there could have been things left off screen, because I think that would be something that Anakin would share with him.
He's been secretly manipulating him to think that
Ashley's really trying to ride this theory. He's like full tinfoil hatting this crap. Like, but I think, this scene would be more impactful if this wasn't a prequel. No, but like watching it originally, we already knew who the fuck Palpatine was going to be. Like,
yeah, well, you say that, but there was a lot of people, younger people, like friends I had in school who, as I said before, like the prequels were their first Star Wars movie, so they had no idea. Like,
or so if you watch, if you suggest that for Star Wars fans, for the main core of Star Wars fans that aren't young, or they watched it, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. Like, they watch it in what some people would believe is the correct order, or whatever. if you've watched 4, 5, 6 and you come into this, it doesn't make this scene as impactful as if all of a sudden you would have this holy fuck moment of, oh shit, like this is...
I don't know.
This guy...
There could be some people who didn't click that that's the Emperor.
Possibly. I don't know. I mean,
he doesn't look like the Emperor until he starts doing the electricity thing.
He looks like the Emperor in like episodes 1 and 2.
Lots of people wear black cloaks.
I don't think that like the shock value of, oh my god, he's actually the Dark Lord. I don't think that's really matters, because it's like, I think it's more fun to watch the scene knowing fully who he is and just being able to appreciate how menacing.
To watch it. It'd be interesting to watch it with that shock though, that shock factor.
Oh sure,
like,
I'm sure some people do. I remember seeing a viral video going around. Maybe last time.
Was that the little girl or whatever?
The little
it was?
girl who sees Anakin turn and she like freaks out. Yeah,
she's like, no. It's like everyone knew from day one watching these movies, Anakin becomes Darth Vader, but these people who never watched 4, 5, 6, they're like, Anakin's a good kid, like why? And then he turns to dark side. It's like, holy fucking shit! Didn't see that coming.
I would love to watch a kid see the rest of that film after that.
We're through the looking glass.
It's very fucking messed
watching
up.
as he straight up murders everybody.
All of the younglings, kids their age.
This kid who's watched Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, all the Clone Wars, loves Anakin Skywalker.
Yep.
And then it happens.
You know, there's kids out there that
I like that, yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
So, you know, maybe it's better just to show your kids them in order.
I'm going to do that to my kids. I'm going to ruin their lives. Maybe like make sure they love this character, and then I'm going to crush it before them.
It's like, that's what's going to happen if you have a relationship before you're 18.
You know that babysitter you have a silly crush on? Stop. Now.
Next thing I wrote down was just the hello there, because, of course, once again, talking about memes, the ultimate Obi-Wan meme, just chuck it out there that if he better say it once during the Obi-Wan TV series.
No, it would be
hello there.
Like the best shit if the first trailer with the first time we see him in that again is like shots of just like landscapes, maybe an overarching narration voice or something, and then it goes to black and then it cuts to him and he says hello there. I'd be like, I'd lose my shit. I'd be like, I'm in.
I don't know.
It's one way to get people to people would be posting it every. It would be an internet bomb.
I mean, if we go on Dylan's theory where a certain other character shows up, it'd be cool if they said it when they see him the first time. Yeah,
Dylan would lose his mind. I'm excited for Dylan losing his mind.
I'm excited for Dylan losing his mind.
Who isn't? Any day now.
You thought Dylan reacting to Sidious's voice was a hype moment.
I'll have to record reactions to if they don't have Ahsoka in the trailers, and I'll just have to record myself watching every episode of the Obi-Wan series, just in case it happens.
It's live watch along, yeah.
I don't know if it still exists on the internet. I don't know if I posted on Twitter or YouTube or something like that. But the last season of Rebels or whatever, I kept recording reactions because like just setting up video, because I was like, because it was the last season, I knew like probably some fucking cool shit was going to happen, and then of course spoilers for Star Wars Rebels. But when we finally get to the episode, and we're going to talk about these episodes in a couple weeks, but there some stuff some mention of Ahsoka and this sort of stuff starts happening, and I'm just like, oh, no. Anything to do with Ahsoka gets good reaction from me. Next thing I wrote down was, I've watched this movie a bunch, and yet every time I watch it, I can't help get that feeling of wishing Anakin just stayed in the council chambers. And that's why like, I actually think this movie is put together rather well, and I think the surefire sign that this movie is actually put together quite solid is the fact that I've watched it a bunch. However, every single time we get to the scene here and it just shows like Padme looking out across the the gap there and like feeling something's up. Anakin like kind of sitting there restless in the office. Mace Windu entering Palpatine's office, and then him like, you know, leaping out and all this sort of stuff. Like, I know what's going to happen, but because it's like kind of paced, I would consider perfectly to like kind of build up that like worrying tension. It's like that your mind does that thing where it semi forgets that you know what's going to happen, and then I'm like, oh, maybe this time watching it something different will happen. But it's a fucking Blu-ray; it's not going to change it. But yeah, so I always get that feeling like, just stay there, Anakin. Just stay in the fucking council chambers. Mace Windu was going to fuck him up. Leave him be.
Yeah. Do you think Mace Windu's dead?
Oh god.
There's an internet theory that he's not dead for whatever reason. But yes, I believe he's dead.
I mean, he only fell like a lot. One, he
he
got
only
thrown
fell-
halfway across the friggin' city. But, you know, he had one good up. He could have caught himself.
Potentially knocked out at the same time.
Nobody dies from, like, long falls, so.
That you know of.
Yeah.
No, I don't believe Mace Windu is coming back. Like, I think that would be silly also. Like, why bring him back? In what regard? There's certain like things you can change, like
Force
how
Ghost.
they've kind of fit, how they've got no, they can't even come back as a Force Ghost because that doesn't make sense either.
Why not?
They changed some things where it's like, oh, some random Padawans like Kanan and Jarrus and like the new character we've got happening in the video game this year, they survive, and you can kind of play around that because they're not big names and they can kind of go into hiding or whatever else. But it's like, oh, fucking one of the biggest Jedi Masters survived and Sidious can't sense that he's alive somewhere. Fuck off. No, I don't buy into that at all. And the reason he can't become a Force Ghost is because to become a Force Ghost, you actually have to learn the ability, which the end of this movie sets up how Obi-Wan knows the ability, and it sets up how Yoda knows the ability, and that's because Qui-Gon Jinn teaches them all.
How's Darth Vader learn the ability?
No idea.
Why loophole? The Force does what it wants, bitches.
That's still one
pretty,
thing.
Pretty sure I asked this question last time, but why Vader? Do you know?
I have no idea. No, I don't know if they've ever
Explained
or delved into it. I don't know if like the Sith have some like notebook they keep of cool names to name their next apprentices or whatever. Like fucking Palpatine's like, you shall be named Darth Maul, and then comes along, you shall be named Dooku. No, he has an
You
actual
don't get
Sith
to
name.
change your name.
I can't remember his Sith name. Fuck me. And no one ever calls him his Sith name in the fucking thing,
It's not
Oh,
important.
but he's just like ticking them off in a book. Maul. Dooku comes along to Anakin. As Anakin's bending down, he looks away for a quick second, like fucking Palpatine, like whips open his
Flashcard.
robe, pulls out something real quick, like what's on the list? Darth Vader.
There's like fan theories that I'm reading about because apparently Vader means father in Dutch or some shit, or it's close to father in Dutch.
Oh shit!
Yeah. And there's people been like, well, Sidious knew that his kids were going to play a big part in the future, so he named him Vader because he knew it was father in some other kind of human language.
That was a George
It's
Lucas
like-
thing.
It's like, no, shut up.
I don't think reading into names is much like. Then it's like, why is Plagueis called Plagueis? Why is Revan called Revan?
No, but why did he pick that name of all the possible names?
I don't know, just
I think, and it sounded like it was pre-planned as well, but like off the top of your head.
Darth Vader. Yeah, I don't have an answer for that. I don't, and also I don't. As far as things I'd like to see answered in extended canon material, probably not high on my list, to be honest. What did I write down? Where was I up to here? Order 6016 is so sad. Once again, kind of like what I was just saying before about how I think it's kind of perfectly paced, where how he's like sitting there in the council chambers and these sorts of things, and it gets me anxious. Watching Order 66 like play out and just seeing Anakin go to the dark side. Once again, I've seen this movie a bunch, and still every time I'm like, no, like, oh. And then when he goes and kills the fucking younglings, every time that random kid pops out and he's like, Anakin Skywalker, you protect us from the mad Sith Jedi, please protect us. And then you see fucking Anakin like whip out his lightsaber. Every time I'm like, oh, that hurts. That's some fucked up shit. It's also just so dark. Like, he kind of...
Again, a complete 180.
It's...
He wants to save
up.
his clone troopers at the start of the movie. Now he's murdering children.
Yeah, it's... And this is why Jedi aren't
And it only
supposed to
took
have
like
a
10
relationship.
seconds for him to accept that's what he was going to do. Cuts off
I
Mace
think-
Windu's arm. Oh, what have I done? Oh, I'll go murder some children now.
Yeah, well, see, it's kind of like it's not like he's fully given into it, but he like has that whole reaction of like, what have I done? Like, Mace Windu's dead now. But then in my mind, it's just him in his head, like, well, I'm committed to this now, like, kind of thing, you know, like, as Palpatine's like, yeah, good job. He kind of just accepts, like, I've just fucking helped kill a Jedi, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
I got to commit, and then of course
He fell
Palpatine's like,
into
I'll
that
give you well, I'll help you protect Padme. And he's like, oh, Padme, yeah, I can't live without her.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Better get
Sad.
down.
Very sad
Do
just
other
seeing
things.
another person fall into a life of crime.
You know, ever see those things on Instagram? Like, get yourself a boy who will do this. Get yourself a girl who will do this. Get yourself a boy who will murder thousands of innocent children just
Nope.
to spend one
Nope.
more day with you.
Nope, that's all right. It's okay. We don't need those 24 hours.
That's
All
what
right.
That's what we need. What did I write down next? I wrote down the quote, this is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause, just because I think it's one of the best written poetic lines in the whole franchise. And like, of course, a lot of the prequel stuff is to do with politics, and well, not so much the third movie for sure, but I've always kind of loved that line where Palpatine comes in, fucking dipshit gives him supreme, you know, he's coming in like, I'll turn the fucking place into I'll become an emperor. I'll rule all of you. Fuck this shit. And it's like, you know, this is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause.
I mean, when you think about it, the first movie, he first gets into power because everything's so slow. It takes forever them to want to even look into the issue of the Trade Federation. And then in one sentence, he decides, I'm going to have all the power. I'm going to be emperor now.
Yes.
But
Pretty
he's
much.
just like, that line is almost Shakespearean in the way that it's written. Like, to think that the you know, in the same movie franchise that came up with, now this is pod racing, also
I don't
came
like
up
sand.
with that I don't like sand. It's coarse.
That was Shakespearean.
No.
I'm pretty sure that was in
They could
Hamlet.
come up with such a line that can deliver such a complex eloquency to it is pretty good, actually. Good job.
On you, George. On you. 1 out of 10.
Good on you.
1 out
Next-
of 5,000 lines.
Next thing I wrote down was Yoda just knocks these two fools out, and that's in relation to when he walks back into that room. You know, Order 66 happens, of course, blah, 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 blah. And then Yoda and Obi-Wan sneak back onto Coruscant, and Yoda just like kind of waddles into this room. There's those two guards like standing in Palpatine's room, and Yoda just very subtly just like, and they kind of just, they're not even far from the wall, but they must get knocked so hard against the wall, they kind of just and get passed out. And this Yoda's like, yeah, fuck it. Like, every time it makes me laugh. This entire fight scene that happens between him and Sidious actually makes me laugh. Especially the shot where fucking Sidious like chucks fucking Yoda across the room, and then Yoda turns around, chucks him across the room, and Sidious gets chucked into that fucking chair, and he's fucking ass overhead, like with the fucking coat he's got, the cloak he's got on. It's fucking hilarious every time I watch it. Now, I wrote down best fight in Star Wars: Obi-Wan versus Anakin. What do we reckon? Yes or no?
Yes, because it is the only fight in the Star Wars franchise between two lightsaber wielders. Well, the movie franchise between two lightsaber wielders that are so closely matched. Because every other one, there's always either like Yoda Dooku, Yoda's doing flippy shit, but he seems to have the upper hand when it comes to the lightsaber combat. You've got Darth Vader versus Obi-Wan later down the track, but Obi-Wan's fucking old, and Darth Vader easily kind of overpowers him. He holds his own for a while, but there's always that understanding. And I think a lot of the other ones, there's always like one fighter is always way more experienced or way more talented than the other, where I think in Anakin versus Obi-Wan, they're they're fairly evenly matched. If not, in Obi-Wan has experience, whereas I think Anakin has a lot of raw talent, so it kind of balances out.
Ash?
Yeah, probably. I can't think of any other one that comes even close.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Well,
would have
it's like
said
even-
the Praetorian Guard one in the Last Jedi until like 4 or 5 weeks ago.
Yeah, I think this. I definitely feel like this is the best fight scene, and it's the thing about it is I always find funny is because even a lot of people who hate like prequels suck, fucking prequels suck ass, blah blah blah. They'll often be like, yeah, but I really love this fight scene, and I'm like, to me, I don't feel like this fight works unless you somewhat at least buy into like Anakin's history and what's happened, because as much as you can complain about the prequels, the reason this fight I think is so epic is because A, it looks cool, it's shot well, you know, they're on lava, they're fucking, as Ciaran was saying, they're evenly matched, so it's an enjoyable fight to watch in that factor, but also the emotion behind it, you know, you've got literally one guy just like full rage turning to the dark side, like this prophesized chosen one, like there's so much Obi-Wan feeling fucking betrayed, like his master, like his last dying wish, train this kid. Obi-Wan feeling like he didn't do a good enough training the kid, like this is his fault that this has all happened because he fucked up as his master to Anakin, all this sort of stuff. There's so much emotion and story happening in this fight, and it looks fucking cool to watch. Like that's the reason it is so good, because you can have a really cool looking fight, sure, but it ain't going to have without the emotion behind it, you're not going to be as driven as an audience sitting there. And like, once again, all these fucking, I love the end of this movie, by the way. My least favorite part of this movie is probably the fucking going to find, as much as I like the, oh, hello there, like the whole Obi-Wan stuff there, that's my least favorite part. But the last act of this movie, from the moment Anakin starts turning and everything like that, is just like a roller coaster ride of emotion and action and all these sorts of things happening. And much like the scenes before this, where I'm like, I've watched this movie so many times, and I've watched this movie so many times, I'm watching this fucking fight scene, and I'm still just like, oh, like who's gonna win? I know who wins, but I'm still just like, oh no, like I'm
Is that
invested
one
every
shot
single
though
time.
of them like swinging their lightsabers around themselves, making no contact with each other?
Yeah, everyone makes fun of that, but that's always been the prequel fighting style, where they're like, they've explained it where the reason the Jedi fight with that is because they're like constantly swinging around and like reacting. So they're not going in for hits. They're like literally changing between like different forms and positions is what it's supposed to kind of represent. Like they're kind of like, and they're like switching form. Of course, if you don't, that's like a canon sort of explanation, and that helps me have zero issues watching it. But people on the internet like to put up that GIF and be like, yeah, but look at this fight, it's fucking shit, blah, 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 blah.
So 99% of people are like, what the hell is this? And the 1% of hardcore Star Wars fans are like, yes.
But also, that's very much
changing
nitpicking.
positions.
It is literally one fucking 2-second scene where they're just like swinging them around real fast. That
It's
someone
funny to look at.
People have GIFed. Yeah, I think it looks fucking cool. Every time I see that GIF and people are like saying like, yeah, but the prequel fight scene is shit. I'm like, I don't know. This GIF is pretty cool. Like, I have no problem with it.
They were just trying to pay homage to General Grievous from earlier in the film.
I
Yeah.
will say, honorable mention, because we haven't really mentioned him in the notes yet. General Grievous versus Obi-Wan Kenobi is a really enjoyable fight. I really like.
It's fine. I think I'm saying in the context of this movie, it's my least favorite stuff though.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's fine. Like
I mean,
it's cool. I'm
Grievous should have
glad.
won, technically. I mean, how do you lose when you've got a 4-on-1 advantage?
Well, when
'cause-
your one is Obi-Wan Kenobi, like
Got him. Next thing I wrote down, you can see the disappointment with himself on Yoda's face. Of course, we covered this in the Phantom Menace episode, I think, but you know how Yoda's like so puts the blame on himself, and it somewhat is like we kind of covered, but you can
And subsequently goes crazy. Yeah.
and subsequently goes crazy. Yeah, but you can really see it in that final scene here where he's kind of crawling through the thing, and like when he drops down into the ship there, and you can kind of
It's
just see on
like
his face how sad he is.
it's like a wounded animal walking away from a fight. Like,
Yeah, very much.
kind of wishing that fight didn't end with him walking away, even if it meant his life. Like, it's a lot harder to bear the burden
Surviving.
than it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Next thing I wrote down just as a funny little thing is where Anakin's like, from my point of view, the Jedi are evil. Says every Trump supporter as you tell them Trump's evil. From my point of view, yeah, well, you're wrong. Shut up. Then I wrote down, everyone found it weird when Maul survived. Meanwhile, you got Anakin clinging to life through nothing but pure hatred here, and no one has problems with it.
Now, I don't know if I asked this last time we recorded this or if this was the theory I read after this we recorded it last time. Do you buy into the Anakin stealing life force from Padme theory?
I liked the theory, and I very much enjoyed kicking it around for a while. I don't know if maybe I even believed it prior to this watching, but as of my current watching of the movie and sitting there watching that scene happening and being like, okay, give me some signs. Let me. I got headphones on. I'm watching this movie. I'm listening to the breathing, the beats, like how it's all working. I'm paying close attention. No, I don't think that's what's happening.
Okay, fair enough.
I legit think she just, unfortunately,
she just died
dies.
in childbirth.
Gives up hope.
Yeah, like his vision said.
Because of him.
Because they don't have top health
Because of
care.
the choices. No, but why the fuck was she giving birth in that ship?
She wasn't in a
Because
ship.
of
They're on a
Anakin.
planet. They're on a planet.
Yeah.
I thought it was a ship.
No. Remember,
They
they
escape.
take a ship, they land, they get
Oh,
out.
fuck.
And then
No, they do.
they're like-
Okay, yeah,
They're like,
yeah.
take her to the medical bay, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just to tie into kind of what I said before I wrote down, there's no way we don't get a Qui-Gon in the Obi-Wan TV series with how he's mentioned at the end here. Because if the Obi-Wan series is like 3 years after this, or no, 6 years after this, and how Yoda's like, training I have for you in your solitude, blah, 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 from an old friend, teasing how Obi-Wan's going to have to practice the technique to be able to turn into a Force ghost and these sorts of things. I find it hard to believe that we're not at least going to get one Qui-Gon ghost thing,
Scene.
which we kind of talked about in once again in a previous episode, that I think that's going to happen. We all pretty much think that's going to happen.
Wow, Qui-Gon, you aged so much in death.
No, we got it's fucking Disney. They can use that Marvel
they can
de-aging
de-age.
technology. They're fucking good. And then
What do
the
you
last
think
thing I
they
wrote
talk
down,
about for like 20 years?
good cuppers. Don't know.
Qui-Gon's like, what's it taste like?
Yeah, maybe. The last thing I wrote down was our short time on the beautiful planet of which this podcast gets its name are the Tranquility. Because it's the only time we ever see anything on Alderaan is like this 30-second scene of.
What about next
fucking-
week's episode?
Next week's episode is Solo.
Aren't they on
when do they
Alderaan
go
at
to
some point in that?
Alderaan?
So I don't think they go to Alderaan on Solo.
They go to they talk to the.
I know they talk to Jimmy Smits again.
Yeah,
No, they go.
Maybe he's not on Alderaan though.
like Ambassador Alderaan himself's there, but
Jimmy Smits.
Don't worry, we'll see it in episode 4.
Yeah, we will from afar. That's right. From
from a
very
distance.
far.
It hurts less from a distance.
Yeah, it does. So that brings us to the end of the episode. But of course, where are we all ranking it now? I think this is going to be the last of the easy weeks, surely, somewhat.
Yep.
Come on. All right. So, Ciaran, where are you ranking this? Previously, you've currently got it
This
number
goes
10, episode 2,
above-
9, episode 1.
This goes above the other two.
Yeah,
So
so
it
you're
just
putting
slots
this
in.
at 8th currently. Ash, where are you putting it?
This is also the top so far.
Yeah, and of course, I'm also going there. So currently, all three of us have the exact same rankings, which is at 10, at 10th position, episode 2, at 9th position, episode 1, and at 8th position will be episode 3. And I think from next week on, because we are, of course, ranking all of the rest of the Star Wars movies, including Solo and Rogue One. They will all be part of this, and I think from next week on, our rankings should hopefully get somewhat more outside the box interesting. Yeah. Okay, so that is it for this week's episode of Alderaan Explosion. Next week we'll be discussing, as I just said, Solo, a Star Wars story. So make sure you watch the movie before then. Please share this episode on social media and tag @ExplosionPod if you're enjoying it. Tell your friends to rate on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. Alderaan Explosion is a Darth production of ExplosionNetwork.com, which is where you can also find What Do You Want to Watch, our fortnightly movie and TV podcast. And if you like Star Wars movies, you probably like other movies. You can follow me on Twitter at Vivaladil, Vivaladil. You can follow Ash on Twitter at Ashley Hobley, ASHLEY, Follow Ciaran on Twitter at your boy Ringo. And may the Force be with you always.
Like and subscribe, you will.